What if I told you that women today do not want your comfort? They want your struggle, and they will push you toward it even when they act like they do not. In a world where attention is the new currency, women are surrounded by endless validation from strangers online, and yet they are still restless, still searching, still demanding more from the men beside them. You scroll through your feed and you see it everywhere. Women posting, sharing, performing, receiving hundreds of likes in minutes, while men measure themselves by how many of those likes they can secure. The reality is simple. Women are not impressed by men who bend. They are drawn to men who resist, who grow, who sharpen themselves against hardship. This is not because they enjoy your suffering directly. It is because your suffering reveals whether you are weak enough to fold or strong enough to endure. The world changed, and so did the rules. Women do not depend on men to survive anymore, which means they no longer settle for safety. They look for the man who can transform pain into progress, and they test you without saying it out loud. Look closer, and you will see that every man who crumbles under modern pressure loses her respect long before she ever walks away. She may smile while she praises your kindness, but deep down, she is watching how you move when the weight hits. Do you collapse into distraction, or do you build from it? She does not need your protection the way her grandmother did. She needs proof that you can stand taller than the chaos around you, proof that you do not drown in the same flood that consumes everyone else. That is why betrayal and disappointment strike men so hard. They thought love was enough. But in truth, women want to see you suffer, not because they hate you, but because only through suffering can you show them you are not replaceable. From the time you were a boy, you were told a story that shaped the way you see women and love. Movies, schools, parents, even songs drilled the same message into your head. Be good to her, provide for her, stay loyal, and she will never leave you. That was the fairy tale that built your expectations, the script that turned love into a reward system. You worked harder because you believed loyalty was guaranteed. You swallowed pain because you believed sacrifice would pay off. You built an identity around being the man who always shows up. But the world you live in today is not the same one that wrote the story. The fairy tale collapses when you realize that devotion is not automatic, and that promises are not binding, when modern life constantly tempts people with new options and new distractions. The abyss opens the moment you see that loyalty was never a law, but a choice, and choices change with the times. In today's reality, women no longer need a man to survive, which means they no longer remain loyal out of fear of losing stability. They have careers, money, freedom, and technology that gives them independence generations before could not imagine. That independence rewrites the contract of relationships. The promise that once felt eternal is now fragile, because there are no punishments for leaving, and there are endless incentives for chasing more. When men wake up to this shift, they often feel betrayed, but the truth is that they were following a script that no longer exists. The abyss is that moment of awakening, the cold realization that the fairy tale was designed to keep you in line, not to guarantee your reward. You are not living in the old world anymore, and the rules have changed. Every man feels it. The pull to be recognized, the hunger to be valued, the quiet need to be seen as worthy in the eyes of a woman. This drive shapes behavior more than men want to admit. It explains why so many men exhaust themselves working endless hours, chasing promotions, and buying things they do not even need. They believe that the more they achieve, the more secure their place will be in her heart. Yet in today's world, recognition is cheap because attention is everywhere. Women are surrounded by endless signals of desire, not only through social media, but in workplaces, gyms, and even casual outings where strangers approach or comment. Validation has become so constant that a man's effort to stand out often fades into the background. The will to be wanted is no longer about proving survival or stability. It is about competing in an environment where the supply of attention has multiplied and the value of one man's devotion has dropped. This is why so many men feel invisible despite working harder than ever. They live in cities filled with opportunity. They earn more than their fathers ever did, and they still feel that what they provide is not enough. The modern woman does not measure worth only by what you give materially. She measures it by how rare you are in a world full of men who are doing the same thing. She wants to feel that you are not replaceable, that you are different in a sea of repetition. The will to be wanted becomes dangerous when you tie it to her approval, because her approval is never permanent. When you hand over your value to her recognition, you hand her the power to define you. And that is the fastest way to lose both her respect and your own. Men were raised to believe that loyalty was an unspoken rule, something automatic and unquestionable. But the reality of modern relationships shows otherwise. Loyalty has never been a law written in stone. It has always been a contract, a choice shaped by circumstances, incentives, and opportunity. In past generations, the contract was supported by survival. A woman depended on a man for security, resources, and stability. And that need created loyalty, whether she wanted it or not. In today's world, that foundation no longer exists. Women have careers, income, independence, and access to networks that allow them to survive and thrive on their own. That shift makes loyalty fragile because it is no longer tied to survival, but to satisfaction. And satisfaction is not stable. The truth is that loyalty today lasts only as long as both people feel they are benefiting from the contract. And once one side believes they can do better, the agreement dissolves without hesitation. This reality is visible everywhere. Look at divorce rates. Look at relationships ending after years of investment. Look at how often men are blindsided after believing they were doing everything right. The problem is not that loyalty has disappeared, but that men are still treating it like a permanent law, while women treat it like a contract that can be rewritten at any time. If she feels unhappy, if she believes she can find more excitement or more status elsewhere, the contract changes in her mind, and society supports her choice to leave. Men who fail to understand this live in confusion, expecting eternal devotion when what they really have is a conditional agreement. The modern man must stop expecting loyalty to be guaranteed and start recognizing it as a decision that must constantly be earned and understood as temporary in nature. Betrayal does not begin with a sudden act. It begins quietly, long before the moment you can point to. It begins in silence, when resentment builds inside her and pride blinds you from seeing it. In modern relationships, emotional distance often grows unnoticed because men mistake routine for stability. You think because you live together, share meals, or talk about daily plans that everything is fine, but underneath the surface, she is comparing the reality of her life with the expectations she once had. Resentment is born when she feels her needs are not heard, when her excitement fades, or when she thinks her life with you has become predictable. Pride keeps you from addressing it because you believe providing and showing up is enough. You miss the warning signs because you assume betrayal would only come from weakness, not from the quiet buildup of emotions she never says out loud. Reality shows us that most relationships today do not collapse from one single event, but from years of distance that no one wanted to acknowledge. She starts laughing at another man's jokes more than yours. She becomes more engaged in conversations with friends than with you, and she begins to build a world where you are no longer central. This does not feel like betrayal at first, but it is the start of it. The emotional connection that once held you together is now leaking away, and by the time it becomes visible, it is often too late to repair. In today's world, where people have constant access to attention, new conversations, and new outlets, emotional betrayal has become easier to hide and harder to confront. Men who ignore these signs end up blindsided because they thought betrayal only meant the physical, when in truth, it begins quietly with resentment that was never resolved. Temptation used to require effort. A man had to approach in person, risk rejection, and prove himself worthy of attention. Today, temptation is everywhere without cost, and it exists in a marketplace where everyone is both seller and buyer. Women present the best version of themselves online, at the gym, or in everyday life, and they are met with constant reinforcement that they are desired. This is not only about social media. It is the way dating apps provide endless choices, the way workplaces create constant interaction, and the way cities put people in contact with strangers every day. The mirror reflects back to her that she is wanted, and the more she sees that reflection, the more she believes she can upgrade whenever she feels like it. Modern temptation does not live in the shadows. It stands in front of her every day, reminding her that the contract she is in is never permanent. This environment changes how relationships operate. A man is no longer only competing with his neighbor or a coworker. He is competing with a pool of men she believes could be better, richer, more exciting, or more available. This illusion of endless choice reshapes her standards, even if most of those options are not real. When temptation feels infinite, loyalty feels temporary, and men who do not understand this mistake comfort for safety. They think providing consistency will keep her satisfied, but in reality, it makes her wonder if she is missing out. That is why so many men feel blindsided when she suddenly leaves for someone they never considered a threat. The modern marketplace does not reward stability. It rewards rarity, and only the man who refuses to compete for her attention stands out in a world that never stops offering her more. Power in relationships rarely changes loudly. It shifts quietly, often unnoticed until the balance has already tipped. In the past, a man held power through resources and protection, but modern life has removed that advantage. Women now have independence, education, and access to careers that allow them to live without depending on a man. This does not mean they reject relationships, but it changes the way power moves. The shift often begins with small withdrawals. She stops asking for your advice, she no longer includes you in her future plans, and she begins to create a life where your role is reduced. Men who sense this often double their effort, thinking more giving will restore connection, but this only makes the power imbalance worse. She sees your desperation and knows that control has left your hands. This silent withdrawal is one of the most destructive forces in modern relationships because it is rarely confronted directly. Instead of speaking about dissatisfaction, she invests in other areas of her life where she feels more fulfilled. It could be her career, her social circle, or new experiences that do not include you. To you, it looks like distance, but to her, it feels like freedom. The danger is not when she argues with you, but when she no longer bothers to fight at all. When silence replaces conflict, it means she has already started to detach. In today's world, with endless outlets for validation and distraction, she does not need to endure dissatisfaction. She can simply walk away, confident she will find another source of excitement or support. The man who fails to recognize this power shift ends up confused, wondering why she left when the truth is she had been slowly leaving long before she was gone. Nothing destroys attraction faster than routine that turns into comfort. At first, comfort feels like success. You have built stability, you have created predictability, and you think that this means security. Yet in reality, comfort is the quiet killer of desire. Women may say they want safety, but what keeps them engaged is the tension of unpredictability and the challenge of growth. The moment she can predict your every move, the relationship shifts from excitement to monotony. Modern life makes this even more dangerous because routines are everywhere. Work schedules, commutes, and daily tasks all repeat without change, and relationships often become another cycle in that system. What begins as love becomes the same conversations, the same meals, and the same expectations until she no longer feels anything that stirs her deeply. Reality shows this more clearly than ever. Many men today focus on maintaining peace, believing that avoiding conflict will secure loyalty. They stop taking risks, stop pursuing new challenges, and stop pushing themselves to grow once they believe they have won her. But the moment growth stops, attraction begins to die. She does not leave immediately, but she begins to look outside the relationship for stimulation. It might be through new hobbies, new social groups, or attention from others who make her feel something different. Desire fades, not because she stopped caring, but because comfort replaced intensity. This is why so many men are blindsided when a woman says she is no longer happy, even though nothing seemed wrong. In today's world, where novelty is available everywhere, men cannot afford to let comfort dominate their lives. To keep her desire, you must keep yourself evolving, because the man who becomes predictable is the man who is eventually forgotten. A man may believe his worth is measured by who he is, but in reality, it is measured by how others perceive him. Status has always shaped attraction, yet in today's world, the scale of value shifts faster than ever. A man can build wealth, success, and respect over years, but if he loses momentum, his status in her eyes begins to slip. The modern environment constantly reminds her of men who appear more ambitious, more influential, or more admired. She does not need to meet them personally. They exist in her workplace, in her social circles, or in the larger culture that praises men who stand above the rest. This shifting scale creates a constant comparison where your value is never fixed, but always judged against what else is available. The reality is that women today do not only look for stability. They want to feel that their man is moving forward, that he is someone others respect, and that his presence raises her own standing. This is why so many men find themselves left behind when they stop pursuing growth. They thought providing enough was enough, but status is not static. It must be maintained and expanded, or it declines. In relationships, this often shows when she begins to lose admiration. She may not leave right away, but she starts to look at you differently, as though you are no longer the man she believed she chose. In a world where achievement is visible everywhere, standing still feels like moving backward. The man who understands this does not chase her validation. He builds his value so high that losing him feels like losing status itself. And every man sees freedom as a reward, yet in relationships, freedom often becomes the first step toward separation. In past generations, the boundaries of commitment were clear. People stayed because leaving carried heavy costs, socially and personally. Today, those restraints have almost vanished. Divorce is normalized, moving on is encouraged, and starting over is framed as empowerment. What this means in practice is that choice has multiplied, and with it, the illusion that something better is always around the corner. A woman who feels restless no longer asks if leaving is possible. She only asks if it would make her happier. And with so many outlets available, the answer often feels like yes. The freedom of modern life has created not only opportunity, but instability, because nothing feels permanent when every option is still on the table. This is why relationships that look strong on the surface collapse suddenly. Men assume that shared years, memories, and effort guarantee stability, but guarantees no longer exist when freedom is the highest value. She may not even be unhappy. She may simply believe she has not lived enough, experienced enough, or chosen fully enough. In that belief, the relationship becomes temporary by default, a chapter she can close without fear of judgment. The illusion of choice tells her that the next man, The next experience, or the next life, will finally deliver what she thinks is missing. This is the modern reality men face. The restraints that once held relationships together are gone, and freedom has replaced loyalty as the ultimate prize. To survive this, a man must recognize that permanence is no longer built by promises, but by making himself the choice she never wants to replace. Comparison has always existed, but in today's world, it has become impossible to escape. A man is not judged only by who he is, but by how he measures up to the endless examples surrounding her life. She sees men who appear more successful, men who travel more, men who are fitter, and men who seem more confident, and the constant exposure reshapes her expectations without her even noticing. This is not limited to screens. It happens in real conversations when friends share stories, when coworkers boast about their progress, or when she meets someone who carries himself with energy that you no longer project. Desire is fragile because it does not live in isolation. It lives in the contrast between what she has and what she imagines she could have. Every comparison carries weight, and over time that weight becomes the silent judge of your value in her eyes. Reality makes this harsher than theory. You can be a man who provides, who works hard, and who has given her years of stability. But if she compares you to someone who sparks more excitement, the balance shifts. This is not about fairness. It is about perception. The modern environment constantly tells her she deserves more, and comparison becomes the fuel for dissatisfaction. Men often think love protects them from this, but love does not erase comparison. It only delays it. This is why relationships that feel steady can suddenly collapse. It is not that you failed in an obvious way. It is that someone else reminded her of what she thinks she is missing. The weight of comparison crushes men who remain still, but it strengthens those who keep moving, because the man who never stops evolving leaves no room for anyone else to overshadow him. Every man eventually reaches the moment when the illusions he carried about women and relationships collapse. He realizes that love does not guarantee permanence, that loyalty is not unconditional, and that desire is never safe. For years, he may have believed that effort alone was enough, that giving stability would protect him, that being good was the answer. Yet the truth of modern life confronts him with something harsher. A woman does not stay because you gave her your all. She stays because she feels something that continues to elevate her, and the moment she no longer feels it, her presence becomes uncertain. This collapse of illusion is painful, but it is also necessary, because until a man accepts reality, he will keep building on foundations that were never secure. The cost of awakening is heavy, because it demands that men take full responsibility for themselves. It is no longer about chasing approval or begging for loyalty. It is about becoming a man whose value is so deeply rooted in growth, discipline, and purpose that no loss can destroy him. This is not about rejecting women or walking away from love. It is about refusing to build your identity on something that can vanish overnight. In today's world, where options never end and distractions surround us, the only stable ground a man can stand on is the one he builds for himself. He cannot control her choices, her desires, or her loyalty, but he can control the man he becomes. And when the illusions fall, what remains is either strength or emptiness. The question every man must face is simple. When everything else is gone, will you still recognize yourself?